Hello, humans. Hello, come on in, start gathering around. I am, of course, your Tech Humanist. It's the Tech Humanist Show. I am Kate O'Neill, your host. I want to hear from you. Anyone who's already online, say hi. Tell me where you are. I hope you're doing well and enjoying the start of this sort of slide into the holiday season. It's not really happening yet. It's just sort of a gradual slide. Today we're going to be talking a lot about augmented reality and virtual reality and spatial computing. So I hope you'll warm up your questions that you might have around that with our wonderful guest, who I'll introduce in just a moment. In fact, you can start asking those questions. Just get them queued up in the questions and the comments there, and that will help us be able to take as many of them as possible in the time that we have. So just go ahead and keep checking in, saying hello, and ask your questions. So that little bit of administrivia. This, as you may know, is a multimedia format program, which means that as I'm speaking, it's being broadcast live across a bunch of channels, but it'll also live on as an archive on those channels. And then it'll live on as an audio podcast a week and a day later. So this episode will be available as an audio podcast next Friday. And tomorrow, last Thursday's episode will be available as an audio podcast. And then that's it for the year. This is the last live stream of 2020. We're going to go on a holiday hiatus for a while, recharge, rejuvenate, get some juices flowing, and see what we're going to do for 2021 to make this an even better program and bring you even more exciting content across a wider range of tech humanist topics. So anyway, I hope that you'll subscribe and follow and also ask your questions. Now, do note that with those questions and comments that you post here in the chat and the comments, that we may not get to all of them, but we will try to take as many as we possibly can. So now to introduce our guest. Today we are chatting with the lovely and brilliant and talented Cathy Hackl, a futurist, speaker and author, and a globally recognized augmented reality, virtual reality, and spatial computing thought leader. She's been named one of the top 10 tech voices on LinkedIn for 2 years in a row, the highest honor on the platform. She currently works as part of the enterprise team at one of the industry's top OEMs. Prior to that, Cathy was the lead futurist at You Are Here Labs, where she led agencies, brands, and companies in applying augmented reality and virtual reality for marketing and training, working with brands like AT&T and Porsche. Hackl, Cathy, worked as a VR evangelist for HTC Vive, or Vive, I'll have to ask how that's pronounced. I always see it, I never hear it said, during the launch of their enterprise VR headset and during the company's partnership with Warner Brothers blockbuster Ready Player One. She's the co-author of Marketing New Realities, the first VR/AR marketing book ever written. She also worked as Chief Communications Officer for cinematic VR studio Future Lighthouse, where she collaborated on projects with Sony Pictures Entertainment, Oculus, Beefeater, and William Morris Endeavor. Hackl has been featured in media outlets like Forbes, Barron's, Salon, VentureBeat, Digiday, Tech, Target, CMO.com, and Mashable. Got to get the whole list going on there. She's a global advisor for VR/AR Association, recognized in 2016 by NBC News as one of the top Latino women working in VR. Cathy is currently working on her second book, The Augmented Workforce: How AI, AR, and 5G will impact every dollar you make. She's co-authoring the book with John Buzzell. Before working in spatial computing and technology, she worked as a communicator at media companies such as CNN, Discovery, and ABC News, and was nominated in 2007 for an Emmy Award for her storytelling work. She's also the creator of the world's first holographic press release and loves all things spatial computing, artificial intelligence, and futurism. So please keep getting those questions ready for our outstanding guest. And with that, please welcome my friend, Cathy Hackl. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm so pumped to be here. I'm so excited.
Oh my gosh, it feels like it's been a lifetime since you were in New York. It was like maybe a year
Yeah.
ago, I guess, and we saw
Yeah.
the Augmented Reality art show, which was amazing. You
It was
probably
September of last year. It's been more than a year. So Yeah, it seems like a decade ago, right? But
Yeah, it feels like a lifetime. Like a real whole lot of stuff has happened. I talked to somebody this morning on a Zoom call, and we were like, we ran into each other about that time on the street in New York, which does happen incidentally, as people often are like, boy, it must be an anonymous city to live in. Like, no, actually, you do see people you know. And it's just been like we were trying to cover all the wide range of things that have happened in between, and you just can't. You just can't.
yeah, oof,
But so
it's
now,
crazy.
yeah. And so what's interesting is that in this year, amidst all the tragedy and sadness of it, also what's been interesting though has been the shift to augmented and virtual workspaces and workforces, in fact. So that really leads right into the themes that you're working with, right?
Completely. I mean, it does feel like, it's been, we've accelerated 10 years in a year, something like that. A
Yeah.
lot of the things that I thought I'd see further down the line with VR adoption, with AR, you're starting to see them a lot sooner. So that's quite exciting. Having worked in this industry for the past 5 years and always thinking this is the year of VR, this is the year of VR, right? I'm not saying that 2020 is necessarily the year of VR, but I think we're getting closer. So that's an exciting time for sure. And yeah, definitely a lot of growth and also a lot of changes in the VR AR space. But yeah, it's just an exciting time to be part of the industry. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
It's truly exciting. I mean, I think every year is exciting, but this year it's despite the pandemic and everything, it's exciting to be part of the industry.
Right. Yeah, I think that's it. Is like, you need the caveat because nobody wants to have this pandemic happening. But certainly it has provided the backdrop, or it has provided the incentive, I should say, for the transition that we were all sort of anticipating happening more gradually, which is, I think, what we're both sort of saying here. So what have you seen happening at scale in the last year that you only saw happening like in dribs and drabs before that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got further adoption on the enterprise side. So you see more and more companies like DHL, like Shell, like Volkswagen having meetings in virtual reality. So what they've done is they've sent their executives or team members a virtual reality headset, and they put on the headset and they go into these virtual meeting rooms, virtual reality meeting rooms, and kind of have collaborative meetings and experiences. And you do have a sense of presence when you're doing that. So that further acceleration, I think, has been really exciting. And then from a consumer standpoint, or like a bigger mass market, let's say, seeing what's been happening with concerts, with virtualized concerts, everything from a concert in Roblox that's happening soon, to concerts in virtual reality, to even Burning Man. Burning Man had a whole virtual reality. It was Burning Man in virtual reality with, I don't know, I think the total they had about, I can't remember the exact number, but it was like 100,000, something like, I don't know what the number is, to be honest. I don't want to say the number, but it's like 90,000 people together at the same time, in VR. I don't think it's 90,000 quite there, but it was a large number. And just having all those people together in this Burning Man camp in virtual reality, it's a small number, but it just shows that we're getting there, right? We're slowly getting there to that mass adoption.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just that it seems like it's across a bunch of different use cases that's so interesting. So
Yeah.
you have, Burning Man, Burning Man on one hand, and Shell and the other enterprise examples that you
Mhm.
mentioned on the other, where, you're trying to address different needs, different kinds of problems to solve. And that's what I think, for me, what's been interesting about watching this year is that you have so many different kinds of entertainment that needed to be replaced in a sense,
Yeah.
and in-person meetings and conferences, and so many kinds of things. So you are actually seeing something that looks like an approximation of like when you see people gathering in virtual reality for things like conferences, or something like Burning Man. Are you seeing the experience that feels like, yeah, this is something. Like, it's obviously not being at Burning Man. It's obviously not being at the conference in person. But does it feel like something? I mean, I just wonder what your take on that is.
It does. I mean, I have that sense of presence that I don't necessarily get from Zoom call necessarily, right? So like I spend obviously a lot of time in social virtual reality with my friends, and and I love it. Like I was just thinking the other day, I was like, oh, I haven't seen this other friend in VR for a while. I wonder what's up. But it's been a good substitute of sorts to not being able to travel to conferences and not being able to have that interaction. I'll give you an example, like with the Wall Street Journal, they have the WSJ Tech Live, which is their big tech conference, and they had certain parts of it were in VR, and that was a lot of fun. I mean, I was in Spatial, which is one of the platforms, hanging out with Joanna Stern and with Jason Mims, and like in this kind of experience where like I got to spend some one-on-one time with them, and I don't know if I would have gotten that if I was in a Zoom call, and I don't know if I would have gotten that in person either,
Yeah.
because I don't know, a lot of people probably wanted to hang out with them, but it's been a really interesting time, I have to say, a very interesting time, and that sense of presence is palpable. I mean, I've done everything from virtual reality escape rooms to virtual reality concerts to all sorts of activities at this point, and I have such a great time. I wish more people could experience it, because I think it's, when you talk about it, it's really nice to talk about it, but people don't really get it. Once you put on the headset and you're in this virtualized space, those are memories. I have memories of VR experiences because my eyes, believe what they see. I'm in this experience. I'm in an avatar, which is fine, but I'm having a social experience with my friends. For example, Oculus had venues, and they had a concert with Steve Aoki, and I mean, I met with four or five of my good friends in there. We had a blast. We had a blast. We danced we danced we danced our tushies off. It was great. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I went to a concert with them, even though it was a virtual reality concert. So I'm excited about that.
That's amazing because all the virtual reality experiences I've had have been exciting,
Mhm.
but with that sort of this sort of mental caveat of like, yeah, but it's not there, and it's not real, and doesn't feel real. So you're having probably far more advanced versions of those experiences, which is exciting to know that that's what maybe lies ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in this, for example, I did one called Dr. Crumb's Disobedient Pets, which is pretty much an escape room, right? So I'm in there, I'm in an avatar of a hamster, my friend's in an avatar of a cat, and we got to solve all these puzzles, and there's a whole story, but like we got to do it. Like we have to move this here and this here to be able to open the door, and like we had such a good time. I don't know how to explain it. Like we really had a blast. And it's, yeah, if we would have been in a physical escape room, we would have had to do some of those things as well. So yeah, I mean, it's, to me, it's just been a lot of fun, exciting. The possibilities are there. I think something else that I'm noticing that I think is extremely interesting too, and it's not so much VR, because I don't want to just focus on VR, because
Right.
it's VR, AR, and XR, which is extended reality, is an umbrella term. It's also kind of what's happening in our phones. Um, we're going to brick and mortar, but we're going to brick and mortar less,
Hmm.
obviously, because of the pandemic and just trends in general. So you start to see this need for that virtual try on, for using augmented reality to buy your makeup or to buy clothes, what have you. And it's also transitioning not only from the virtual try on, but it's transitioning into what I'm calling the direct to avatar economy.
Hmm.
So we're selling direct to avatars, and you start to see this. It's a, and I'm exploring this in a lot of my writing, everything from virtual dresses that you're buying or custom avatars. For the Venice Film Festival, we had a developer create custom avatars for several women in VR. So we have our custom avatar in VR chat, things like that. You're starting to create this virtualized economy that, it's been there for a long time with Second Life. But I think now it's like, when you really try to put terms together and understand, it's a direct to avatar economy. So yeah, everything from, and this is the reason I always talk about this now, is because my son is 8 years old. He recently did his first communion. And when we said, hey, what do you want for, as a gift? What do you want as a gift? Right. He said, I don't want money. I don't want like cash. I want a Roblox gift card that I can turn into Robux, which is the currency that you use inside Roblox, so I can buy so and so whichever gamer's skin, right? So it's like the skin for their avatars. So and when I was growing up, like my brother was saving up to buy Air Jordans, right? That's what he wanted. He wanted Air Jordans. My son doesn't want that. He wants to, he wants Robux, which is a digital currency inside a video game, to buy something to do for his avatar.
So
So
both
it's
wanting to
this.
wear something just in
Mhm.
different modalities.
In different modalities, you start to think this is direct to avatar. Is direct to avatar the next direct to consumer? And that's the question I pose in some of my writing.
Yeah, so I've seen some of your writing talking about things like, as you mentioned, like virtual makeup, for example,
Hmm.
and that seems like that goes beyond the sort of Second Life or the virtual meeting space sort of thing because we're all having so many of these Zoom calls and everything every day that the idea that I remember this scene in I think it was in Fifth Element where there's a this tool that sort of slaps up onto the one character's face and it's just a full face of makeup. You remember that scene?
Yep.
I just remember seeing that scene and going like, "Can I have that, please?" Like
Well,
the
right
idea that
before
you
we
could
went
just be
live,
what's that?
yeah, right before we went live, I was like, okay, I got 2 minutes to go put makeup on. Blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, L'Oreal just released a digital first makeup line. I was like, man, if they could incorporate that into my Skype, like that would just be great because I would have to not worry about this and I would just be like, boom, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, it's got its positives. Uh,
Yeah, and you could do, a face tattoo if you wanted to. You could do any kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely not this is not gals only for any guys watching and we're moving so beyond like binary gender anyway. So this is a
yeah,
fun area that I think is going to be fun to explore. So direct to avatar economy. That's a great concept for us to take forward. And you see, I'm glad you clarified or you moved into the discussion about augmented because for me, augmented reality is like where it's at. Like
yeah.
I often tell the story about how, there have only been two technologies that I've like seen for the first time in my life that I got like the tingles on the back of my spine. And the first one was the graphical web. Like I saw that and I just went, this is going to change everything. And of course it did. And then I saw augmented reality. That was the only the second technology that I ever saw that gave me that feeling and the sense of like this is going to change everything. And I don't think it has yet. I think we're still yet to see it play out, how fully it could change everything. But do you feel that way about it too, in a sense?
Yeah, but this is how I view it because obviously having working in the industry, I see it a little bit different. I see this like the merging of the digital and the physical coming together,
Uh-huh.
and this creation or enabling of the metaverse or the AR cloud or the spatial internet or whatever term. There's many terms to describe this convergence, right? Where the world's painted in data, where the world becomes machine readable, clickable, likable. And what happens is this is kind of how I explain it to people. It's once we break away from these screens, right? When we move from this into glasses, into, any type of glasses, I call it the Rayban moment for some reason. Like I can imagine myself wearing these really cool Raybans, but I'm going to be seeing content. This content that I'm usually seeing on my phone, I'm going to see it in front of me. So you start to think about that is like, how is content going to change? Because right now content is flat. I'm seeing it on a screen. Even if it's a 3D model, it's still a flat screen,
Hmm.
right? But then you're actually going to be putting content in someone's reality, in someone's world. So that changes the paradigm, not only for the big box stores and the big corporations, but also for the mom and pop shops and the restaurants. I have a friend who's one of the co-founders of Meow Wolf, which some of you guys might know, but Meow Wolf is very, very, it's experiential art and experiences, just amazing stuff. And he just set up a new company called, gosh, what is the name? I cannot remember what the name is, but basically what he's doing is starting to prepare spatial programming, and spatial with a T, by the way, not space. Spatial, like spatial as in spatial computing with a T, where he's starting to kind of create spatial programming for companies because eventually that's what people are going to expect. They're going to, right now they expect to see your Google review, they expect to see, um, you know, all these things. Eventually that's going to be up here and it's going to be in their field of view. So yeah, I mean, this kind of transition into the metaverse, I think, is quite exciting and really does change everything.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it really seems like it. And for me, a lot of what was exciting that first time I saw it is because I think about it's like, as you're explaining, that it's layers of context and meaning. And so, a lot of my work has to do with meaning. And I'm thinking about, of course, wayfinding is sort of a classic
Mm-hmm.
example of this, right?
Yeah.
As you're navigating through a city and you're potentially being shown your directions as you move, but you could be being shown other meaningful things too, like history and the context of the buildings around you and so on. That seems powerful, but then you talk about all the other industries, like you just gave some retail examples. I think about healthcare. I think about so
Mm-hmm.
many kinds of industries that where that seems applicable and powerful. What do you think is going to get there first? Is it retail that you imagine is going to be where we see some of the power really unleashed
I
in
think, yeah,
demonstration?
yeah. I mean, for a mass market, probably. It's already happening on social media, right?
Hmm.
With lenses and all these different activations. I mean, Snapchat is doing a great work as Instagram, Facebook are related to AR. But I think you're already seeing it in the like the manufacturing side, this adoption. I'm personally, really interested in, and I don't know if I wasn't really planning to talk about this, but I'll talk about this here is using these technologies as as what I call the printing press of the future. Okay. So when you had, the other day, not the other day, last year, I went to the Library of Congress and they have a Gutenberg Bible there, and I stood in front of it and I kind of looked at it and I said, wow, what an impact the printing press has, had in our society. I think everyone agrees on that. And then I started to think, but wait, what is the future of memories? What is the future of stories? What is the future of how we will retain history? And I started to think through how VR, AR, volumetric video, 3D models are the printing press of the future, right? And the reason I arrived at this is also related to a project I'm working on. I was working on a virtual reality project and we wanted to incorporate a hologram. And it was going to be the hologram. We were going to volumetrically scan the former First Lady of Costa Rica that was alive when in 1948 the Costa Rican army was abolished. So Costa Rica does not have an army. It invests its money in education and other things, right? So this former First Lady of Costa Rica was 102 and a half. We were coordinating everything to get her up here to DC to Avatar Dimension to get her volumetrically scanned and have a hologram of her. And she got coronavirus and died. And it was a race against time. And I feel that there is a huge need to volumetrically scan and capture the stories of historical figures, whether it's Holocaust survivors, so we can retain those stories and make sure that that lives on, to heritage, anything related to a native, a language that might be dying, a dance that might be going away. So I feel this strong, and I'm so passionate about this, about using these technologies for historical preservation. And I'm currently working on creating a program with Avatar Dimension for that specifically, and thinking of through the concept of these technologies are the printing press of the future. So, and I wasn't really planning on talking about that, but I feel the need to share it because imagine if you're walking around and there's historical figures and you have actual stories, living stories of the things that happened somewhere, right? I
Yeah.
think that might be, I don't know. It speaks to me at this moment.
Oh, sure. I'm glad you did share it. I mean, that's a powerful illustration, and it's something to imagine for us. It also it seems like an interesting segue into a question I wanted to ask you, because when I had Caitlin Ugalip Phillips here on the show as a guest, we talked about, of course, her book, The Future of Feeling, and she interviewed you for that book, and we talked about you just a little bit, and about your story, about how VR was helpful for you in terms of regaining a sense of emotional connectedness. And I'd love to hear that from you. I think in the context I should set up a little better is that normally I think or sort of conventionally, when people talk about virtual reality, there's this discussion about empathy, about how it's an
Yeah.
the sort of Chris Milk empathy machine discourse comes up, and there's a lot of discussion about that. Caitlin took that apart a little bit and examined it in her book, but one of the subjects that she talked about was about your experience with it. Could you relay some of that for us firsthand?
Yeah. Yeah, because it is part of my narrative and part of the story on how I arrived at VR. This goes all the way back to 2004. I was working for CNN. Part of my job was to look at all the raw footage that was coming in from the war in Iraq back then. So, I mean, it was my job to sit through gruesome things like beheadings and things that people don't really want to sit through, right? And I don't want to put those images in people's heads, so I won't go into detail. But that was part of my job. I had to sit through those to alert affiliates if there was sensitive material in Part X, right? So I always say, and I jokingly say, I was a Facebook moderator before there were Facebook moderators, because that was my job. I had to sit through this. And when you have that type of role, you have to in some way turn your humanity switch off just a little bit, or maybe not turn it off, but dial it down in some ways, just to try to get by and leave that part I can't say that word, compartmentalized over here, right? So it wasn't, fast forward to about 5 years ago, I went to a conference. I was speaking at that conference about live video, which is what I used to do. And I was invited to put on a VR headset. It was the first time. And I went into an experience called Confinement that was created by The Guardian. And it's an experience that puts you in a very small solitary confinement cell where prisoners spend 90% of their time. And within a couple of minutes of being in that cell, I took the headset off. I was claustrophobic, and there was something in me. And the only way I can explain it is like the switch was turned back on, or the dial was turned, and I felt, I eventually felt empathy, or I prefer the term compassion, to be honest, for these people in solitary confinement. And yeah, it just changed me. After that, I said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And how the heck do I get into this industry? And it's been a journey. It's been, 5 years. It's been quite a journey since. And yeah, it just, and to that point about empathy, I think empathy is a beautiful word and we need empathy, but I prefer to use the term compassion, because I feel that empathy makes me feel for someone else, makes me feel, bad or whatever it is for that person. But I think compassion really leads to action. And I think that that's more important. If this can lead me to donate, or if this can lead me to truly care about something, then I think compassion might be the right word to use. I'm fine with empathy. I just think compassion might be a better word to use in this context.
That's a great argument. I think that's it's worth considering. So what about now, as you think about the uses of VR and AR, what ways do you see them being used currently, or about to be used? Like, do you imagine they're about to be used that could help foster more compassion amongst other people and help lead to greater action?
I think several. I recently did a talk for the Department of Labor where we were discussing the 30 years of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and how some of this technology is going to allow people that have some level of disability to have access to jobs that they were not able to have before. Yeah. And I think that that's a very powerful use. Anything related to accessibility and allowing someone that can't see to be able to see. That's power. That's technology for good. And I think that that's what makes me excited, right? So definitely things like that. I'm looking right now also, in the Scientific American had an article about this yesterday, about using digital twins for medical purposes. So creating these digital twins, there's digital copies of us with our organs, and having doctors being able to see that and in some way technologically trying out potential treatments to see what could happen. I think that there's something there. I think that is very powerful. NTT Research, for example, I think they're dedicating $250 million to this initiative, which is creating these digital twins or digital copies of us to be able to see what would happen if we did this. And I think that that's powerful. Once again, if you think about it from the medical standpoint, having residents or students being able to dissect a virtual cadaver multiple times before they get to the real cadaver, or practicing a surgery 100 times before they get to the surgery. I would prefer to know that my doctor or my surgeon practiced this 1,000,000 times, in real life, but also virtually before they get to my surgery, right? So I think that kind of use is exciting. And I think what you talk about when it comes to, tech humanists and kind of thinking through this technology is designed for humans, right? It's human-centered design at the end of the day. It's how is this useful to humans? And I think that that's powerful because we tend to forget that and we tend to over-index on the technology. I mean, I hear it all the time, like technology, AI, it's going to take all the jobs. It's going to take all the jobs. I'm like, no, you're missing the point. It will automate jobs and it will take some jobs, but it is going to create new jobs, and it's also going to allow us as workers to do jobs in a different way. It's more, I don't see it as something that replaces. I see it more as something that can complement us.
Hmm.
And I think that that's a change in the narrative that I would love to see happen.
Yeah, that's complementary to the way I talk about it too. Although I think it is important that we're very eyes wide open about the displacement that really and replacement that really could happen and will happen, and how it affects individual as well as groups of workers. So with that in mind, I guess I want to ask you, what when it comes to AR, VR, and spatial computing with a T, what do you feel like we need to be cautious about? What do you feel like some of the areas where we need guardrails, that we need to be thinking about the consequences of this development in terms of human impact?
100%. I think privacy. I think you had a talk with David Ryan Polgar the other
Mm.
day. I mean, privacy, ethics, incredibly important. I don't want us to, in a decade and a half, be having the conversations that we're having now. With people watching The Social Dilemma on Netflix and being like, oh, I had no idea. I'm like, no, they've been doing this like the whole time, people. Right? I was like, how did you not know that? But anyway, I think we need to have those conversations now. I'm very lucky in a way to live in Washington D.C., and I say that in a weird way, being
Take
that
the good with the bad.
the good with the bad. But from the fact that I live here, I actually get to see what's going on in Capitol Hill. So from a VR AR perspective, and I'm not trying to get political, from a VR AR perspective, there's actually a reality caucus. So AR, VR, MR reality caucus on the Hill. There was the introduction last year of HR 4103, which is a bill that seeks to explore the use of AR and VR for professional development and training of federal workers. It's going to be reintroduced in the next Congress. So there's a lot of things that I start to see here that I think are incredibly important. And the conversations that we need to have about these technologies need to happen, and they start here. They should start here, at least
Yeah.
from that perspective. So I do feel lucky to be here and be able to see that and be able to kind of be a part of that.
That's great. Do you feel like there are additional regulations that need to be discussed in terms of specifically of spatial computing and AR or VR?
I don't necessarily want to get too down in the weeds with that. I do think that there are frameworks that are getting put out right now. The XRSI framework is definitely worth a read. So yeah, I think it has to be managed responsibly because it is putting that digital into our reality. I mean, that's a huge impact,
It
right?
seems like
So,
you mentioned privacy as one of the areas we need to be cautious. So
mhm.
as long as we're putting regulations in place around privacy with a mindset of, that we're talking about also, this physical presence kind of
Yeah.
usage, these mixed reality kinds of usages. That seems like an
Mhm.
important point. Hey, I wanted to mention that we have a comment from Jerry Gobb says, how about user isolation and negative social effects? Do you want to speak to that concern?
You mean in virtual reality?
Yeah, I think that might
Yeah.
be what he's asking about. Yeah, just in
Mhm.
terms of the use of these augmented, presumably more virtual reality than augmented
Yeah.
reality.
Well, I mean, I think that's always been a problem in some ways with any technology, right? Gaming, that's also been a big debate in gaming. Like kids spending so much time just playing games. I'm a fan of my kids playing games. I do ask them to kind of balance it, right? They can play with their socialize with their friends on Roblox, but still go play a soccer game, an actual physical soccer game. So I think it's a balance. I do think that a lot of the companies working in making VR better are looking at it as a social platform, as a platform where you can come and enjoy and have fun with your friends and your family. So I'm excited about that. I mean, yeah, I do worry. I don't want us to. This is the thing. People always tend to think Ready Player One, right? So pretty dystopian. right? The world has gone to hell, and we can only put a headset on to go into the oasis, and that's the only thing. I'm like, I'm more protopian. I have a more protopian approach. I'm not utopian necessarily, but I'm not necessarily dystopian. And I think that, yeah, I mean, I think certain people are going to suffer from isolation. But at the other side of the coin, one of the nonprofits that I used to serve on, the whole intent, the whole role and purpose of this nonprofit was to take virtual reality to homebound seniors. So that senior for 20 minutes put on a headset and went to a beach in Hawaii. I mean,
Yeah,
took them out of the place, right? So it's two sides to the coin.
sure.
Everything has to be in balance.
And I think we've all seen this year, many of us have experienced, sort of quasi homeboundness and what it means to us to be able to connect with others in virtual space or at least in some sort of virtual connection has been invaluable. So yeah, there seems like there's both sides of that coin for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is, I think, the other thing. When I talk to my children, I had a talk with them the other day about Roblox. That's their preferred video game. I said it's a video game. So I was recording them and I said, guys, tell me about Roblox. And instead of saying, oh, it's a video game, the first thing both of them said is, it's a community, mom. That's where we go to be with our friends and to see our friends. And that, to me, if you think about it, is a completely different perspective. And I'm like, okay, so video games are the social media network of the future, or whatever you want to call it, right? They see it as a community. That's where they spend time with their frins,
It is.
right?
It's a
So
great
gamers.
answer. How much do you think that they were strategized that in advance and were like, okay, here's what we gotta tell mom.
No, I don't think they did that. I'll every once in a while I'll just grab them and ask him a question. The other day, my son was like, mom, there's flying cars. They're testing flying cars right now, and I don't think the flying cars are that far off. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's great. I start a lot of my talks. I started with a video of my son talking about where he sees technology going.
Oh, I
So
love
it's really
that.
cute. Yeah. He says, gloves that can see through walls, and like he just goes off
Wow.
on this, and I'm like, wow, I think he's asking for quite a lot. But yeah, I think it's exciting. So it's two sides of every coin, and I don't want to dismiss the question because I think that yes, there is a problem. I worry also from an AR perspective on how we view ourselves, especially young women, and men too. I mean, yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's cool. But if we only use filters and if we only use digital makeup, what
Right.
happens when we actually meet someone in real life, right? It's partly what happens nowadays, regardless with social media. But once we add those layers and those filters, I don't want that to necessarily impact my daughter and think that she needs to look like an anime or what have you to be pretty. So
Right. Right. What other exciting tech are you keeping your eyes on besides flying cars and gloves that can see through walls?
uh, I'm very keen right now on brain computer interface. So brain computer interface is pretty much the way I'm going to explain it is, if you've been following Elon Musk, you've probably heard of Neuralink. He's working on BCI, but it's more internal.
Mhm.
The ones I've been trying are all external devices. So I'm able to put a device on that reads my brain waves and reads my intent,
Mhm.
and it knows that I want to scroll an iPad, so I'm able to scroll an iPad. Or I've been able to turn on lights just using just my thoughts, or play a video game, or input a code. I've been able to do all these things, and I'm very keen on it, very interested in seeing what's going on. I wrote several articles about BCI and Forbes that have been very well received. And yeah, I think the biggest thing that has stuck with me from studying these technologies and trying them out from an external perspective is that my brain actually really likes it, loves the workout. Like I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, the receptors here, the pleasure receptors are like lighting up. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'm still sitting with that. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. But I think these technologies can allow us to do a lot of things, especially people with disabilities. Being able to use a virtual hand that if they don't have a hand, being able to use a virtual hand to do things in a virtual space. I think that's powerful. So yeah, I'm looking at that. I'm looking also, like I said, exploring the direct to avatar economy and everything that's happening in the metaverse. That's obviously a bigger conversation. And I'm thinking through space marketing, like in space with a C, like actual
Yeah.
space. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been tracking that for a while, and it's just been interesting to see. kind of where it's going in this sense of like, taking marketing into space and kind of the considerations we need to have there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
definitely I wrote an article about space marketing as well in Forbes. And I was like, are you serious? I was like, no, I'm serious. I'm serious. This is happening.
That's
So
great. Yeah, there's definitely some big watch outs there, it seems like. Like we don't want billboards in space.
yeah.
No.
There's a company called Space Billboards,
Of
but a
course.
lot of people definitely got in pushback. I was really interested in what L'Oreal did, no, Estee Lauder did recently, which was send up one of their serums up to the International Space Station and have the crew take pictures of the serum in space. So it's the first beauty product in space, right? It was, I think, less than $200,000 for the whole thing, but it's interesting because it opened a lot of questions. I'm like, so now the astronauts are content creators and creative directors because they're the ones that have to do these shoots, right? so,
Wow.
so I'm like, wait a second. And then even the price, was it in the, I can't remember the exact year, but Pizza Hut sent up a pizza to the ISS to a cosmonaut. I think it was in the 90s, and they paid $1 million for that. It's like a little pizza, a space pizza. They paid $1 million for that pizza. I mean, Estee Lauder sends up their serum and it's $200,000. I'm like, wow, the price of space marketing is really going down substantially.
Right.
So, I don't know. Just things that I'm exploring and thinking through. I think we're going to see space marketing activations during the World Cup in 2022. Yeah, it could be interesting.
Yeah, you notice it wasn't Domino's pizza though because they couldn't deliver it in half an hour or less.
There you go. There's no way.
No
Not in
way. Well, hey, I want to give you a chance. So, two things. I want to make sure, since this is our last live show of 2020, I want to go out with an optimistic view. So, I want to give you a chance at the very end to say what you're hopeful about, in terms of technology that's solving human problems at scale. But I also want to give you a chance before we get to that to make sure that people know how to find and follow you and your work online.
Thank you. I mean, LinkedIn is really where I share a lot of great content and my opinions and videos. Yeah, it's really, I think, the best place for to connect with me. Forbes is a great place to read my articles as well, but definitely LinkedIn. You can also go to my website, cathyhackl.com, and yeah, just feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. It's always fun to have those conversations.
Yeah, and you're sharing such interesting stuff all the time in all those places. So yeah, with that in mind, you've got your eye on everything. You've talked already a lot about some things that you see coming, sort of down the road. But when you think about, what really could help solve human problems at scale, you're thinking about climate change, thinking about, refugee crises and climate-based refugee crises that are going to amp up, and so many other problems, not to mention the actual problems caused by emerging technologies and the shifts in work, geopolitical upheavals, you name it. There are a
Yeah.
lot of problems. Oh, and of course, let's not forget COVID and any other pandemics that might want to join the
Mhm.
party. So, what do you think of when you think about what really feels hopeful
Mhm.
in terms of either how tech can help solve these problems or just in general what you're seeing that gives you hope for the future?
So I am very hopeful about the future, and I'm more protopian. Like I said, and protopian really means that it's neither utopian or dystopian. The truth is going to be somewhere in the middle. Technology is going to help us make us better. It's a progression towards better. But there are going to be downsides and there are going to be negatives. So I think that having kind of that protopian view helps. I also think I come to analyze things, and I come to analyze what the potential futures could look like, right? From frameworks and from kind of strategic foresight and being trained in that. And I think we can't over-index and just focus on technology, even though that's my forte and that's where I play most of the time.
Hmm.
I cannot allow myself to just do that. I have to think about the society, environmental, political, all the different elements that play into the reality of our world, right? So
Hmm.
so once again, that's why I think being in DC gives me an interesting bird's eye view of what's happening. So yeah, I don't have the answer to that because if I did, I have a Nobel Peace Prize at this point if I had the answers to all those questions. But I do think that when we analyze something, I call it futures intelligence, is really using not only the power of emerging technology, but also looking at all the different, things related to society, political, economical, environmental, trends, and kind of try to put those things together and better understand what are the potential futures, right? And when you look at the futures and you look at the horizons and you say, okay, there's these are some of the potential futures that could occur. What is a preferable future? How do we work towards that future, right? So yeah, actually, I'm working on a really interesting project with the armed forces of all of all groups, for creating and bringing one of their global futures report to virtual reality, so that instead of people reading just a report, they're actually able to experience it in VR and kind of go through those potential futures, and how does that change the way you make decisions. So
That
yeah,
that
I'm
feels like
thinking a
a
lot about
very
that.
full circle moment for you with, having just talked us through that
Mhm.
360, that live video sort of experience of the solitary confinement sort of situation, and bringing that sort of compassion to the
Mhm.
military into conceptualizing what impact different actions could have.
Yeah,
That's powerful. Thank
yeah,
you for doing that work.
you're welcome. I'm excited. I'm really excited about this project. So
Well, fantastic. Well, I know we have to make sure you can get to your next meeting. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for being here. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. It's been a wonderful run of this series so far. I look forward to bringing you more in the future. And Cathy, thank you so much for being here with us.
thank you, and Kate, thank you for doing the show and bringing amazing people to talk about really relevant and important things. I wish, I just want to, thank you and congratulate you for the show. So
Oh, thank you so much, Cathy. Take care, everyone.